The wind keened like a living thing across the white expanse, a song of grief that carried the scent of loss. Beneath the twin moons, the pack gathered in a circle of frost-slick stones, their breath pluming in rhythmic bursts that shimmered in the cold. Rha'Korr, alpha of the Verrathi, stood at the center, taller than the others, his fur matted with rime, his yellow eyes steady despite the tremor in his chest. He held a small leather collar in one clawed hand. It was red once, now darkened by the blood of his son. Around him, 11 others did the same, a dozen fathers mourning the cubs who had vanished into the blizzard 2 nights ago. They spoke no words at first. Silence was their first offering to the dead. When at last Rha'Korr lifted his muzzle, his voice was a growl carved from ice. "No pack survives without its young," he said. The phrase was ancient, passed down through countless generations. He closed his eyes and whispered the next line, a plea more than a command. "May the frostmaw choke on their memory." The others echoed him, low and mournful. In the distance, the storm raged still. White walls of snow drifted like ghosts, reshaping the landscape each hour. The blizzard had swallowed the cubs' trail completely. Rha'Korr had led the search himself, tearing through the storm until his claws bled, but he found nothing, no prints, no scent, no cry. Only emptiness. The frostmaw had likely taken them. That was the truth every father in the circle feared, but none dared to say aloud. A soundless figure stood beyond the stones, watching. The Verrathi did not notice him, nor would they have cared if they had. To them, he was a rumor in human shape, a survivor from a crashed metal beast that fell from the sky a week ago. A Terran soldier, fragile, furless, and foolish enough to walk their frozen world. His name was Hale. Hale's visor flickered with static, his oxygen levels dangerously low. The snow had found its way into every joint of his suit. He had wandered in the white for nearly 30 hours, chasing faint pings from his damaged locator. The moment his eyes found the glow of the Verrathi's ritual fire, something inside him pulled taut. He knew those shapes, though not the language. He'd seen the smaller ones before, the cubs who had stumbled into his crash site, lost and terrified. He remembered their wide eyes, the way they had huddled near the wreckage's heat, trembling under the howling wind. He had given them food from his ration kit, wrapped them in insulation, and told them to stay hidden while he scavenged for signal parts. When the storm hit, the sky itself had come apart, and the world went blind. He hadn't been able to reach them again. He'd searched until his strength gave out, until even his tears froze on his lashes. He had failed before on other worlds under other skies, but not like this. These were just children. He pressed a hand to his chest where the emergency beacon should have been. It was cracked beyond use. He could barely feel his fingers. Each step sent a shudder through his bones, but he kept moving closer to the circle of aliens. Their shapes were clear now, tall, broad-shouldered, coated in silver-gray fur that caught the moonlight like steel. They were mourning something. He already knew what. Rha'Korr lifted his head suddenly, nostrils flaring. "The wind carries strange scent," he murmured. Torvan, his beta, growled softly. "A scavenger. The dead draw carrion." Rha'Korr shook his head. "No, carrion walks upright." The pack turned, eyes narrowing toward the dark outline staggering through the snow. For a long moment no one moved. Then Hale collapsed to one knee, his visor half-frosted, breath heaving. His voice broke the silence, hoarse and human. "I found them." The words were lost in the wind, meaningless to the Verrathi, who did not speak his tongue. But the tone, a mixture of sorrow and defiance, pierced the cold just the same. He didn't approach further. Couldn't. His body trembled uncontrollably. Rha'Korr stepped forward, shoulders squared, every motion deliberate. To his pack, the human was a trespasser, an intruder from the stars who crashed fire upon their world. Yet when he looked closer, he saw something in the man's eyes that was not weakness. It was the same hollow ache he saw reflected in every father there. Rha'Korr let out a low snarl, a question wrapped in sound. The human tilted his head as if trying to understand. The storm answered instead, screaming across the ice plains. Hale pressed a hand against his chest again, whispering to the empty air, "They're alive, please." He didn't know if he was begging the alien or the storm itself. A gust slammed into him, knocking him backward into the snow. His vision blurred at the edges, black and white merging. The pack watched in silence. To interfere in another's fate was against the code of mourning. Only Torvan spoke, his voice low. "Let him freeze. The cold takes what it must." But Rha'Korr didn't answer. Something about the human's final expression, determined even in collapse, clawed at the Alpha's instincts. He felt a strange unease, the way one does when fate shifts beneath their paws. The storm intensified, sweeping across the plain, erasing tracks, extinguishing torches, forcing the pack to retreat toward their den. When they were gone, the white world fell still again. Only Hale remained, motionless beneath the falling snow. His suit systems flickered weakly, warning lights fading one by one. Yet beneath the ice, deep in the shattered crevasse not far from where he had fallen, faint sounds echoed, tiny voices whimpering in the dark, muffled but alive. The storm roared again, swallowing the world whole. And above it all, through the endless white, a human heartbeat refused to stop. Cold. That was the first thing he felt when consciousness returned, cold biting through his suit, through skin, through bone. Mark Hale opened his eyes to darkness alive with faint blue, light bleeding through the ice overhead. His visor had gone black, the power cells were dead. When he exhaled, the vapor hung before him like smoke from a dying fire. Then he heard it, a soft, high-pitched sound that didn't belong to the storm. He turned his head. 3 small shapes pressed close together in the corner of the cave. Wide golden eyes glowed faintly, watching him. The Verrathi cubs. Their fur was dusted with frost, their breath coming in tiny, visible puffs. Hale's pulse stumbled. They were alive. He forced himself upright, every movement heavy, his muscles stiff with cold. "Hey," he rasped, voice raw against his cracked lips. The cubs didn't move, but one of them, the smallest, with a jagged scar on its muzzle, let out a weak chirr. Hale remembered that one. The brave one. He had named it Rhine, though it probably had its own name in that guttural alien language. His survival instincts took over. He tore open a half-frozen ration pack, its contents barely edible but enough to share. The cubs hesitated until he broke off small pieces, placing them on the ice. One crept forward, sniffed, and took it gingerly in its teeth. When the others followed, a spark of relief flared in Hale's chest. They still trusted him. He checked his wrist display, no signal, no warmth readings beyond the cave. The blizzard outside was still raging. He had no beacon, no communication, and only a few hours of suit heat remaining. The cubs wouldn't survive that long. Neither would he if he stayed still. He dragged himself toward the back of the cave, gathering what debris he could find, shattered plating from the crash, strips of insulation foam, pieces of his torn flight harness. It wasn't much, but it could be something. His hands shook as he worked, fingers numb, but the rhythm of doing, of building, kept him from falling into despair. He fashioned a small sled, crude and uneven, binding it together with fiber cord from his gear. The cubs watched in silence, heads tilting in unison, eyes gleaming like molten gold. When he finished, he turned to them and said softly, "We're going home." They couldn't understand, but they understood tone, the conviction behind it. The smallest, Rhine, let out a low hum, pressing against his knee as if to agree. The storm was a wall of screaming white when he stepped out. His first breath outside froze the moisture on his lashes. He wrapped the cubs tightly in thermal foil and set them on the sled. The makeshift tow line bit into his palms as he leaned forward and pulled. Each step was a negotiation with gravity and pain. He thought about how this world wanted him dead. It wasn't personal, it was simply indifferent. The Verrathi had evolved for it. Fur, claws, lungs that drank frozen air. He was soft flesh and stubborn willpower, and right now, the second mattered more than the first. The storm clawed at him, trying to strip him from the sled, trying to bury them all. Hale lowered his head and kept moving. Every few steps, He looked back to make sure the shapes beneath the foil still shifted, still breathed. When one of them whimpered, he murmured something, words that didn't mean anything except that he was still there. Hours blurred together. He lost feeling in his feet, then his hands. The world narrowed to snow, breath, and the constant drag of the sled. His vision dimmed at the edges, frost crawling across his helmet like spiderwebs. The cubs cried softly now and then, a sound that hurt worse than the cold. It was a sound of life. When his strength began to fail, he thought of the past. The mission on Calion V. The evac transport he missed by 20 minutes. The faces of the squad he never brought back. He remembered the promise he'd made after that. Never again. Never leave anyone behind. It had been just words then, something to whisper into the dark to keep himself from breaking. But out here, it was all he had left. He began talking to the cubs as he walked, voice barely more than a whisper. You know, your old man, your alpha, he's probably out there. Big guy. Looks mean, but he'll be glad to see you. The wind howled in reply. He'll probably tear me apart afterward, he added, almost smiling. He stumbled once, then again. The second time, he didn't rise immediately. The snow around him was red where he'd bitten his tongue. His body screamed to stop. But the thought of the cubs dying in the cold beside him pushed him forward again. Crawling, dragging, breathing. Somewhere above, lightning flickered within the blizzard clouds, casting brief shadows across the plains. He could almost see the Verrathi fortress in his mind, a place of firelight and stone, of fathers who still believed their children gone. If he could just reach it. He fell again, hard this time. The sled jerked to a stop. The cubs whimpered beneath the foil. Hale lay there, the snow muffling everything, the silence creeping in. He thought for a heartbeat about closing his eyes, about letting the storm do what it wanted. Then one of the cubs made a small, desperate cry, a sound too close to a human child's wail. That sound lit something fierce inside him. He pushed himself up. His body moved like rusted machinery, every motion tearing at muscle and bone. He gritted his teeth, dug his boots into the ice, and began to pull again. Step, breath, step, breath. The fortress lights were not yet visible, but he could sense them somewhere ahead, just beyond the endless white. When he finally saw them, tiny orange pinpricks flickering through the storm, his legs nearly gave out. Relief and exhaustion tangled together until he couldn't tell which one was heavier. He didn't stop. He couldn't. Each step toward those lights was another heartbeat the cubs could keep. He spoke softly, not sure if the words were for them or for himself. Almost there. You're gonna make it. You all are. His body trembled violently as he crossed the final rise. The wind tore at his faceplate, the world tilting with each breath. But when he looked back and saw the movement under the foil, the rise and fall of tiny chests, he managed one last, broken smile. He whispered, "Told you home." Then he took one more step, dragging the sled behind him into the darkness of the canyon where the pack waited, and the storm swallowed his trail completely. The fires of the frost pyre burned low, their light casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls of the Verrathi den. Rha'Korr stood before the flames, his claws clenched so tightly the joints ached. The scent of burning resin filled the chamber, a ritual meant to guide lost souls to the beyond. Around him, the pack knelt in silence, their muzzles lowered in solemn reverence. The cubs' names would be spoken next, committed to the ash of memory. Once spoken, they would no longer belong to the living. Rha'Korr's breath came rough, his throat raw from hours of chanting. He had not eaten since the night before. He couldn't. His son's absence hollowed him from the inside, leaving nothing but the echo of failure. An alpha who cannot protect his young is no alpha at all. The thought looped through his mind like a blade drawn across stone. Torvan, his beta and oldest friend, approached slowly, head bowed. The winds ease, Rha'Korr. The storm may break before dawn. Rha'Korr's eyes flicked toward the den mouth, where pale light shimmered through drifting snow. Then it breaks too late, he growled. His voice was low but steady, worn down to something sharp and cold. Torvan hesitated. There is talk among the pack. They say perhaps the spirits withheld the storm's mercy for a reason. Rha'Korr turned, his gaze cutting through the dim chamber. There is no reason, only the cold. He paused, then softer. And the dead. Before Torvan could reply, a sound rolled across the canyon, a distant, rhythmic thudding that did not belong to wind or beast. The pack stiffened, ears rising in unison. Rha'Korr's instincts flared. He motioned for silence. The sound came again, closer now, uneven, dragging. The sentry at the gate barked a sharp warning cry. In moments, the pack surged toward the entrance, weapons drawn, their movements quick and coordinated. Rha'Korr followed, heart hammering against his ribs. The snow outside was still thick, swirling like mist around the den's mouth. Through it, a single figure emerged, staggering under a crushing weight. It was the human, the same frail, strange creature they had seen days before at the edge of the plains. His body was hunched forward, covered in frost so thick he seemed carved from ice. Across his back and arms he carried a bundle wrapped in metallic foil. His steps faltered, knees buckling, but he forced himself forward until he reached the torchlight. Rha'Korr froze. A scent hit him, faint but unmistakable. His son's scent. The human dropped to his knees with a sound halfway between a gasp and a sob. The bundle shifted. Small shapes moved beneath it. Then one, the smallest, pushed its way free, whimpering softly. Golden eyes blinked against the light. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Rha'Korr moved first. He crossed the distance in 3 great strides and fell to his knees beside the bundle. His claws trembled as he pulled back the foil. All 3 cubs stirred, breathing, weak but alive. His heart lurched in his chest, disbelief giving way to a roar so deep it shook snow from the den roof. The sound of it cracked the silence, a cry of joy and grief all at once. The pack erupted into chaos, shouts, tears, the thunder of claws striking stone. Fathers rushed forward to lift their children, pressing them close, scenting their fur as if afraid they would vanish again. Rha'Korr held Rhine to his chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his own. The cub made a small noise, half purr, half whimper, and burrowed into his fur. Torvan stared at the humans still kneeling in the snow. The man's visor had shattered, revealing a face pale as bone, lips blue, eyes dull with exhaustion. Blood trailed from a cut along his temple, already frozen into crimson ice. The human swayed, barely conscious, and whispered something no one understood. Then he collapsed forward, his body landing in the snow with a soft, final exhale. Rha'Korr turned, still clutching his son. "Bring him inside," he ordered. Torvan hesitated. "He is not of the pack." Rha'Korr's gaze was like flint striking steel. "He carried the pack." The words fell heavy, final. The other Verrathi obeyed, without question. 2 of them lifted the man carefully, carrying him through the stone gate and into the den's warmth. Steam rose from his frost-bitten armor as they laid him near the fire. His body was trembling violently, but his heart still beat, a slow, stubborn rhythm. Rha'Korr watched as they stripped away the ruined armor, revealing torn cloth and scars old and new. He had seen many kinds of strength in his life, warriors who killed without mercy, hunters who defied the storm, but never something like this. This small creature, soft-skinned and frail, had crossed the frozen plains carrying their future on his back. Torvan crouched beside him, studying the human's face. "He should not have survived that storm," he murmured. Rha'Korr's answer was quiet, reverent. He did not survive it. He conquered it. The cubs stirred again, mewling softly. Rha'Korr turned toward them, lowering his muzzle to meet Rhine's gaze. The cub blinked up at him, then glanced past his shoulder to the motionless human. It whimpered once, reaching a tiny paw in his direction. Rha'Korr's chest tightened. "He will live," he said, not as a question but as command. The pack's healers moved quickly, wrapping the human in heated pelts, applying salves of molten herb and nanogel scavenged from old wrecks. Rha'Korr stayed beside him, the cubs nestled near his legs. For the first time in many nights, warmth spread through the den, not just from the fires, but from something deeper, older, unspoken. When the human stirred, his eyes opened weakly. He looked around, dazed, his gaze finding the cubs first. They were alive, crawling clumsily over Rha'Korr's lap, purring softly. His lips parted in a faint, tired smile. Rha'Korr leaned closer, meeting his gaze. "You are Hale," he said, pronouncing the human's name as best he could. The man blinked, confusion flickering before understanding. He nodded once, barely. "You brought them back." Hale's voice was a whisper of air. "They found me first." His eyes drifted shut, but the smile lingered even as sleep claimed him. Rha'Korr sat back, studying the fragile figure before him. Outside, the storm began to fade, the first stars piercing through the clearing sky. For the Verrathi, storms were omens, signs that the gods watched. He looked up at the ceiling of the den and exhaled a long breath. "The gods test the strong," he murmured, "and sometimes they send their own." He looked back down at the human, this hairless, frostbitten creature who had carried life through death, and for the first time, Rha'Korr bowed his head to something not of his world. The firelight flickered across both of them, and the pack fell silent, united by something older than blood. Outside, the snow stopped falling. Inside, a single heartbeat steadied, slow and sure. The fire crackled softly, sending waves of warmth across the stone chamber. Mark Hale stirred beneath a heavy pelt, his breath uneven, his body still trembling from the cold that had nearly claimed him. His eyes fluttered open to see the faint orange light dancing against the walls, painting alien runes in motion. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The air smelled of smoke, ash, and something musky, animal, but not unpleasant. Then he saw them. The cubs. All three huddled together near the flames, their fur clean and dry, their eyes gleaming like small suns. Alive. His throat tightened, and he tried to sit up, but pain answered him with a sharp reminder of his limits. A deep voice rumbled from nearby. "You wake, small one." Hale turned his head. Rha'Korr stood in the shadows, arms folded across his massive chest. The Alpha's golden eyes reflected the firelight, glowing with a steady, unreadable calm. Hale blinked, disoriented, his voice weak. "How long?" "2 risings of the moons," Rha'Korr replied. "You slept through both. The cold tried to finish you. It failed." Hale gave a dry laugh that turned quickly into a cough. "Story of my life." The Alpha stepped closer, his heavy footsteps echoing softly. He knelt beside Hale, close enough for the human to see the scars cutting through his thick fur. Each one a story, each one earned. "My son breathes because of you," Rha'Korr said quietly. "All our sons do." Hale swallowed, looking toward the cubs again. "They were stronger than they looked. I just followed their lead." Rha'Korr studied him for a long moment, then reached into the pouch at his side and pulled out a small shard of dark metal. It was warm to the touch, etched with glowing lines that pulsed faintly like living veins. "This is the mark of the pack," he said. "It is given to those who bleed for its blood." Hale frowned, confused. "I didn't do it for reward." "You misunderstand," Rha'Korr said. "This is not reward. It is belonging." 2 other Verrathi entered, tall, silent, carrying a bowl of molten resin that shimmered like amber fire. Rha'Korr gestured to Hale's arm. "You carried them through death. You will carry us now." Hale hesitated. He had been marked before, by rank, by duty, by the invisible chains of military service. Those marks had faded or been forgotten, their meanings buried under orders and regrets. But this felt different. This wasn't command. It was choice. Slowly, he nodded. "Do it." Rha'Korr pressed the glowing shard against Hale's forearm. The pain was immediate, sharp, alive, but it didn't feel like punishment. The resin hissed as it sealed the burn, leaving behind a luminous sigil that pulsed with dim light. The Alpha's voice rolled low, solemn. "You are Hale of the pack. fire within snow, brother among hunters. The other Verrathi repeated the words, their voices layering like a single heartbeat. Hale closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. It wasn't human, not entirely comprehensible, but he understood the intent behind it: respect, unity, acknowledgement. For the first time in years, the soldier inside him was silent. Hours passed. The den grew livelier as the pack gathered to celebrate. Flames roared higher, sparks swirling toward the open ceiling where the aurora glimmered through thin clouds. Meat roasted over the coals, the air filled with the rhythmic beating of drums carved from bone. The cubs ran between legs and tails, laughing in their churring tongue. Rha'Korr sat beside Hale, offering him a cup of steaming liquid that smelled faintly of herbs and smoke. "It is the drink of the thaw," Rha'Korr said. "To remind us, winter ends." Hale sipped. It was bitter and sweet, burning down his throat like liquid sunlight. He smiled faintly. "Tastes like bad coffee." Rha'Korr's brow furrowed. "Coffee. Something humans drink to stay awake," Hale said. "Usually tastes terrible, but we pretend it helps." The alpha gave a deep, rumbling laugh that startled a few nearby cubs. "Perhaps it makes you strong. You walk through death carrying our blood. Even our hunters would have fallen." Hale shrugged, staring into the flames. "Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't know when to quit." The laughter faded, replaced by a companionable silence. Outside, the storm had cleared, revealing a sky full of stars, more than Hale had ever seen. The twin moons hung low, reflecting on the snow-covered plains like silver mirrors. For the first time, Verrath Prime looked less like a prison and more like something sacred. Rha'Korr spoke again, his tone quieter. "When the cold came for us, I cursed your kind. I saw the fire that fell from your ships and thought it brought ruin. But tonight, I see it differently. Perhaps your fire was not meant to burn. Perhaps it was meant to light the way." Hale didn't answer immediately. He stared at the flickering flames, thinking of all the worlds humanity had touched, broken, and rebuilt. "Fire does both," he said finally. "Depends on who's holding it." The alpha nodded slowly, understanding. "Then perhaps we hold it together now." The cub Rhine padded over, curling up at Hale's side. The little creature's fur was warm against his leg, its small claws hooking gently into the fabric of his suit. Hale reached down and scratched behind its ear. Rhine purred softly, the sound vibrating against his palm. Above them, a faint hum broke the stillness, a steady electronic pulse. Hale looked down at his wrist. His emergency beacon had reactivated, a soft blue light blinking beneath the cracked screen. Somewhere above the clouds, a Terran rescue craft might already be searching. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked around the den, the pack's laughter, the cubs' cries, the fire's glow reflecting in alien eyes that no longer looked at him as an outsider. He thought of what waited beyond this world. Another debriefing, another mission, another cold silence between orders. He pressed a finger against the beacon and turned it off. The light vanished, swallowed by the warmth of the fire. Rha'Korr watched but said nothing. Hale exhaled slowly and leaned back against the stone wall, his body finally beginning to relax. The cub beside him yawned, curling closer. The fire popped, sending a brief spray of embers skyward. Hale's eyelids grew heavy, and his voice came out low, almost to himself. "Guess I found the right place to stop walking." Rha'Korr's gaze softened. "You did not stop. You arrived." The alpha stood, raising his head toward the aurora that shimmered beyond the den's opening. "From this night forward," he said, voice carrying through the hall, "the human walks with the pack." He brought back what the storm took and proved that even the cold can yield to fire. A cheer rose, deep and resonant, shaking the very stone beneath their feet. Hale felt the sound in his chest more than his ears, a heartbeat of many becoming one. He looked at Rha'Korr, then at the cubs, then at the endless night beyond. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, he didn't feel alone in facing it. Outside, the aurora burned brighter, its light spilling into the den, painting the human and the pack alike in hues of green and gold. Snow drifted silently across the entrance, a soft curtain falling on the end of one story and the quiet promise of another waiting to begin.